Defeating the charge of racism. Here we go. As Westmen, we live in fear of anti-white slurs, and none more so than being called a racist. Anti-white slurs often precipitate social lynchings. Social lynchings often end in ostracism and character and career assassination. Anti-white slurs, such as racist, also cause us to be hauled before anti-white tribunals at our universities and places of employment. And when we are not fired or expelled, we incur permanent stigmata on our records. Despite the destructive effect on our lives, no one has figured out a way to diffuse the charge. You don't even have to serve white well-being to want to defeat the charge of racist and racism. Every single white person on the planet would benefit from being able to diffuse and defeat that charge. But even though they have failed, we will succeed. How have people handled the charge of racist in the past? They deny that one is a racist. They give examples of non-white friends, lovers, non-whites in their family tree. Another version is to say that they are not the real racist, but the accuser is the real racist. Another example is that they embrace the charge of racism. One says that he or she is guilty of the charge and all of its associations and doesn't care what opinions society forms about that person as a consequence. Another way people have advised to handle the charge of racist and racism is to educate the accuser. Racism was started by thus and such for the purpose of thus and such, and it is used today to accomplish this or that. Often one employing this approach will also reject the concept as a means to end the subject. Finally, sarcasm is used to diffuse the charge of racism, making a face, laughing, saying whatever. What do these four approaches have in common? In all cases, the power of the concept of racism is left intact. Let's go back. When one denies the charge of racist and racism, one has accepted the concept, its meaning, and its power, and left it intact. The power of the concept looms over the person like a guillotine with an anti-white's hand on the lever. When one embraces the charge of racist, one again has accepted the concept, its meaning, and its power, and left it intact. The concept's power now looms again as a guillotine over that individual, but this time society's hand is on the lever. And we need society on our side. We need to appeal to the sensibilities of the average white family. When one educates and rejects, one again accepts the concept, its meaning, its power, and leaves it intact. By defining it, one acknowledges that it is a thing that society recognizes and accepts, even if society has it slightly wrong. So, when one then rejects it after accepting it, it makes you look like a child throwing a tantrum, denying reality. When one acts sarcastically, one again has accepted the concept, its meaning, and its power, and left it intact. By responding sarcastically, one appears juvenile, as though one doesn't understand the full enormity of the concept in all of its associations. So, the solution to defeating the concept of racism is not to deny it, embrace it, reject it, or mock it. The solution is to defeat the concept with another concept. How do we do that? If we control the news and entertainment media, we would neologize or invent a new word. We would insert it into countless scenarios, both fiction and nonfiction, and eventually society would accept it as being real, valid, and powerful. Eventually, because academia and the government are composed of people who consume entertainment, eventually those entities would also accept the new word. But we do not control the news and entertainment media. The anti-whites have cleverly denied us a lexicon to defend ourselves. So we have to use verbiage that, though it is not in the dictionary, is nonetheless both alien and recognizable. It has to carry some measure of its own power in its utterance. Its power has to be magnifiable with the intensity with which you utter it. It must satisfy the need to be a countervailing concept to the concept of racism. And finally, it has to invalidate the concept of racism. So what is the concept? The concept is anti-white and anti-whiteism. I first started using anti-white and anti-whiteism about 20 years ago. At that time, everyone in the white positive movement wanted to call our victimizers by the names of their own taking or slight variations. So communists became commie, feminists became feminazi. There were Marxists and bleeding hearts and do-gooders. I worked white and blue-collar jobs, and I found that I needed something easier to communicate, something that served our well-being. I wasn't going to use the so-called slurs like bleeding heart and do-gooder and epithet lover. And the precise identification demanded by my elders in the cause, such as economic Marxist and social Marxist, did nothing but confuse and intimidate my prospects. So after breaking it down, as I've done for you all here, I decided to call our victimizers anti-whites and their doctrine anti-whiteism. I went deeper as well because there are other elements and objectives to be considered, such as welding our people together. But for the purpose of this discussion, that is as far as I will go with the motivations behind it. My elders and my peers in the cause chided me again and again for referring to our victimizers as anti-whites and their doctrine as anti-whiteism. They said that if we don't use the speech that they have coined for us, society won't take us seriously. But I saw it different. I saw people's eyes light up when they discovered that our victimizers could be put into an easily labeled box, as they had done to us. I saw people willing to listen and understand and repeat. So here's the application. When someone says you're racist, you respond by saying that you are anti-white. If they say that you're guilty of racism, you tell them that they're guilty of anti-whiteism. You stand firm. You remain resolved. You elevate the intensity if you must. If you're dealing with a friend, you can deliver it lightly. That sounds like an anti-white opinion. If you're being charged as a racist, you charge back with force that they are anti-white. This obviously is not going to prevent you in all cases from being fired from a company who is controlled by anti-whites and wants to get rid of you because they know that you're not also anti-white. It's not going to prevent you from being expelled from a university in all cases if there are anti-whites in charge and they want to get rid of you because you are not an anti-white. But in every single case, you will win that argument. You will walk away from that debate with your head held high, as opposed to what happens now, as you walk away, slouch away, with your head hung and your shoulders stooped because you have been reduced again to nothing more but a label, a hated one at that. Instead, you turn this back on our victimizers. They are anti-whites. Their doctrine is anti-whiteism.